Today, on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. With fresh paint and power in their sights, L&H Boats puts in overtime on the Billy Knowles restoration.
We're getting ready to start wiring the engine room, lazarette, cabin area, and we're going to start pulling all the pacer wire into the boat.
George LaBonte joins Brian and Sheryl Battis aboard their fully restored 25-foot Dusky.
Now, Brian fished this boat as a cabin boat for 15 years, and after 15 years of using the boat, he decided it was going to be a much more useful design for him as a center console.
Wildfire Marine begins structural work on a 23-foot Seacraft overhaul.
The boat is completely just a bare hull now, and now we're going to start from scratch and basically build him a completely new boat, renew its life, and it'll be good for another 50 years.
And Two Rivers Boatworks adds a splash of color to the 34-foot Venture project.
The guys have done a great job prepping it, and now it's up to my paint crew to wave their magic wand and make the boat look fantastic.
All coming up on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as we follow one-off builds to all-out restorations in Stuart, Florida's Dreamboat District, home to some of the best custom boat builders in the world. From modest to over-the-top, industry experts from the district's premier facilities show how it's done. Fiberglass repair, custom paintwork, engine rigging, electronics installations, and more. And boating editor George LaBonte shares the stories of boaters who have already turned their dreams into reality. This is Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat.
All right, well, we're still pounding along on the Ono, which is the Billy Knowles project. We finished up the console renovation, which was a display, and then we added on a compass bezel and a few little details just to finish it up and put it in the paint. The boat itself was prepped and prepared for paint. We got hooked up with a very good company that came in and did a spectacular job on the boat. Lettering for the name on the boat is complete. The clear coat on the transom is all done. Con-skid and everything's finished. The boat came out beautiful. Right now, sequence-wise, we hand it off back to our mechanical electrical department, Raphael in charge. He's going to start wiring, finish up the mechanical installation part of the boat, and work towards a finish here.
All right, well, my name is Rafael Martinez, better known as Ralphie. I've been working at L&H Boats for 14 years. We are currently working on a Billy Knowles 36. We're getting ready to start wiring the engine room, lazarette, cabin area, and we're going to start pulling all the pacer wire into the boat. I generally go through the boat, get with the customer, get whatever their wish list is on the boat, and then based on the wish list, we size the wire accordingly to the wire run, amperage draw, breaker size. We run anywhere from 22 gauge all the way up to 2/0 cable. So it's just all based on what system we're going to run with that cable and the voltage and amperage draws of that cable demands. This cable is really easy to work with. It bends, it makes turns. It's really flexible. And in the smaller engine rooms, the areas are really tight, and sometimes you have to make real tight bends, and they work really, really well in that. It's going to be a really good cable longevity-wise. One is copper tin. It's got a good PVC jacket on it. It's going to withstand a lot of salt and the heavy, corrosive environments in the boat. This is a piece that is run throughout the whole entire engine room or throughout the whole boat, so we don't want to cut corners on the quality of the cable. We like using heavy-duty lugs, closed-end lugs, copper tinned as well, and those are double crimped and heat shrunk. Then we use epoxy-coated connectors for the smaller 22, 14, 16 gauge wires. And those are also copper tin, heat shrink, real high quality components. Both ends of the cables are all labeled at the pump or at the source and at the power supply side. It's very easy to diagnose the problems. If you ever have a problem with it, every wire is labeled on the boat. So the engine room panel is a panel that I've designed, that I've used in many different projects here. It works really well for heavy amperage draws. I try and set up navigation, bilge pumps, engine components, all at a 3% voltage drop, and then everything else gets done at 10% voltage drop.
Everything is a lot tighter, a lot smaller, simpler. You know, it's easier to make more stuff fit in a smaller area than it used to be in the past. And it shows, it just gives a look of simplicity when you go into the engine room, of cleanliness. And then after that's all done and we've just finished all that, then we drop the engines back in, align everything, do the final installations. We will do a check in the water, but basically everything's locked down and finished up.
So the owner, Jeff Brown, wanted to update the boat to the Fiat motors, but when we started setting everything up on the boat, the angle was too drastic, too high for them, so we had to basically cut out the old shaft logs, modify struts. We dropped the shaft angle from 14 to 15 degrees to about 9.5 to 10 degrees. Basically, we pick them off, we take the engines, we take them off the shipping containers, we try and lift them as level as possible. In this case, we were able to do one engine that was fully level. We sat it sideways in the engine room, rotated it, and sat it down. The second motor, which would be the port motor, we had to lift up at a drastic angle with two come-alongs, just because we didn't have the real estate or the opening large enough, so that motor had to go in at a drastic angle. But we protect all the stringers, we protect everything with door skin, and then we just go in there nice and easy, and we get them in there without damaging the boat or anybody getting hurt.
When we return, FS Boating editor George LaBonte joins Dreamboat owners Brian and Sheryl Battis aboard their fully restored 25-foot Dusky in this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment. This segment brought to you by Armstrong. Experience the Armstrong advantage.
Do you have the Armstrong advantage? In its most basic form, an Armstrong outboard bracket improves the efficiency of your outboard motor. This equates to a faster time to plane and higher top speeds. The list of advantages continue with improved maneuverability, added space, and a quieter ride. Adding a swim platform, accompanied by an Armstrong boarding ladder, will certainly add to your day out on the water. Isn't it time for you to gain the Armstrong advantage?
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us for this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment with Florida Sportsman Boating editor George LaBonte as we feature anglers who have already launched their dream. Florida Sportsman began these features 30 years ago, and the dreams just keep getting better.
On today's One Man Dreamboat, we meet up with Brian Battis and his wife Sheryl. Brian and Sheryl have a 1990 Dusky 256 that I've got a lot of history with, as well as the two of them. Now, this Dusky lived at the marina where I charter fished out of in Jupiter for many years, and I remember when it was originally a cabin boat and Brian first took ownership of it. I hadn't seen Brian for a lot of years, and I was really curious to see how this transformation took place and how we ended up with a totally new boat by the time he was done.
I met the owner of this boat in about 1998. We did some fishing, some diving, made some Bahamas trips. He eventually upgraded to a 33 Dusky, and I jumped at the offer to take this off his hands. For the first 15 years I had the boat, you know, used it around here, mutton fishing, sail fishing, mahi fishing. The boat ended up getting abused, just like myself, you know, getting older with time. And I figured it was time to do an upgrade. The boat used to have a cabin on it. I figured change was good, so I wanted to rip out the cabin, give me a little more room to fish up from the front of the boat, maybe do a little kite fishing.
Now, Brian fished this boat as a cabin boat for 15 years, and after 15 years of using the boat, he decided it was going to be a much more useful design for him as a center console.
Going into the build, I figured I was perfectly capable. I'm a handy guy. I figured I'd be able to rebuild the boat, but what I didn't anticipate is how long it was going to take me. It took about 3 times as long and about 3 times the money.
While the boat was being built, we actually registered at West Marine because we wanted to get stuff to help us build the boat, and we both of us had all the stuff we needed already. We already had 2 sets of pots and pans and plates. We don't really need fine china. We don't really care for that stuff, so we'd rather have stuff, and our family bought us stuff we needed to rebuild our boat.
I really didn't know what I was getting into. I'd never done fiberglass work before, so I did a couple projects in the backyard to get used to fiberglass. And once I felt like I was comfortable with those projects, I started tearing apart the boat. I redid the transom, stringers, and the deck. Transom is Coosa board, and all the bulkheads are Coosa board, and the stringers are 3/4 inch plywood doubled up, so they're 1.5 inch stringers. Aside from ripping out the cabin, most of the boat stayed pretty much the same with just a few minor upgrades. Front seat right there, I did have a gas tank in there. It was a fiberglass gas tank. I wanted to get rid of that and change it to an aluminum gas tank. So I dropped that tank underneath the deck, and I turned the old gas tank into a cooler and a live well. It's about a 60-gallon live well, and I have another live well in the back that was already there existing. Got a rocket launcher from Birdsall Marine. I had some rod holders welded onto the T-top. I redid all the wiring in the boat. So cosmetically, I did everything except for the final spray. I did all the fairing, all the sanding, priming, final sanding. The paint, I had a friend who paints boats, and I took it over to him, and he painted it for me. And we did the outside of the hull in all craft, blue tone white, and the cap is cloud white, all craft also. We've had a lot of good memories on the boat in the last 20 years. Now that the boat's all redone, I hope to have 20 years more memories on the boat.
When I asked Brian why it made so much sense for him to tackle a job like this, he answered like this. He said, I'd owned this boat for 20 years and I had a lifetime worth of memories on the boat already. And now with my wife, we had plans for the boat in the future, and when it came time to get rid of this boat and buy a new boat, or actually give this boat a facelift and make this boat like new, it made more sense for him financially and as far as from a sentimental reason to do the rehab on the boat that he did. And he's looking forward to having many more years in the future enjoying this boat with his wife.
After an initial investment of $16,000 and spending $12,000 on repairs and custom modifications, the cost of Brian's Dreamboat comes to a total of $28,000. When we come back, Wildfire Marine begins the rebuild and customization of a classic 23-foot Seacraft. This segment brought to you by Fiberglass Coatings, the largest selection of fiberglass materials in the United States.
FGCI is a leading supplier of composite materials, family-owned for over 60 years and headquartered right here in Florida. We have the materials and technical expertise to service manufacturers, repair professionals, and DIYers alike. Our gel coat color matching is a favorite of seasoned professionals and weekend warriors. Access our online store at fgci.com, call to speak with a product specialist, or visit our stores in Fort Lauderdale or St. Petersburg. FGCI is your partner on boat projects big and small.
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as the team at Wildfire Marine begins major structural work on a classic 23-foot Seacraft.
We're working on a 23-foot Seacraft for a customer from Savannah. It's Corey Fountain. He called me a couple years ago about doing a Seacraft project, and then he brought the boat down. And now that we've cut everything out, we cut the entire cabin off the boat. Stripped the old transom out, stripped the engines, drives, all the hardware, all the wire. The boat is completely just a bare hull now. And now we're going to start from scratch and basically build them a completely new boat, renew its life, and it'll be good for another 50 years. Once everything is all stripped out, we go ahead and start with the transom. Because we've done quite a few of these 23 Seacrafts, we have a pattern for the transom. So we go ahead and cut both layers of the transom, 3/4 inch marine ply. You can't beat the strength of wood. You don't have to replace the strength with fiberglass. You know, if you go to foam transoms or other transoms, you've got to put a lot of extra glass in it. Wood already has a lot of structural properties to it, so that's why we go ahead and reuse wood again. And then what we do is, because it is a polyester built boat, we go ahead and use polyester resin that we thicken to form a putty, and then we go ahead and spread that on the transom and the plywood. And obviously it's a little bit heavy for two people, so we use a chain hoist to pick it up and go ahead and set it back down into the boat. And then once again, we use aluminum braces to through bolt the transom and pull it in tight so that the glass is sucked completely flat up against the wood. And there's no air voids that you get by using screws or anything like that. We try to through bolt solid pieces so we have a perfectly flat transom. The first thing we do is we hot coat the wood. If you go ahead and you put resin on and then lay your glass right on it, a lot of times the wood will suck the resin up and you end up with a kind of a dry bond. It doesn't really get a good bond to it, and so we get a good bond that way. We use a 1708 biaxial fiberglass, which is actually stronger than the 24-ounce woven roving that was originally used. So we cover the entire transom with that, and then basically we just try to make sure that there's no air voids. You know, with the pressure from the brushes, as long as you keep working in a certain direction, you'll force all the air out. On the bottom of the transom, we don't go all the way down to the keel. We cut it flat about 3-4 inches above the bottom. And the reason we do that is one of the biggest places for water to intrude into a transom is through the drain plug. So what we do is we eliminate the core material, which is the wood, and we go ahead and glass solid to the transom. That way any of the through hulls that we put through on the transom are doing through solid fiberglass. So there's less chance of any water intrusion. Once that sets up, then we go ahead and we put what I call a reinforcing shelf. It's basically a strong back. And when we glass that shelf into the transom, the glass overlaps down onto the transom where the through bolts for the bracket will actually be pulling on the strong back itself. And that's tied into the corners of the transom, which is probably part of the strongest part of the boat outside of the keel, because you have the overlap of fiberglass from the transom and the hull sides. And it takes a lot of the strain off. I'm not a big believer in the knees, because the knees are relying basically on a bond, where this is a solid piece. So we've had good luck with it. We haven't had any problems with it, so we're going to continue to do it that way. If anyone knows Seacrafts, they normally have a wide stringer that comes all the way to the transom. In this particular case, this boat was a stern drive, so it had basically engine beds and the outer stringers. So what we do is we go ahead and we continue the outer stringers back to the transom. The only difference is we bring them up to where the floor height is going to be. And then we add 2 more stringers in the center, and we carry that back to the transom, that floor height also. Number one, it gives us a good strong transom, and also it acts as a weight bearing for the transom and the floor that we're going to put in later on. Yeah, another thing that we do while everything is open is we cut PVC, a 1/2-inch thick PVC into pump pads, and we go ahead and bond those down, and then we re-glass those so that we're not using any screws to penetrate into the glass to hold your bilge pumps down. We also might have another monkey wrench thrown in here. He called the other day and is thinking about going to twin engines. We had set up already for single. The shelf was built for single, but we can get around that. But we have already acquired the bracket, and we may have to wait a little longer for a new bracket to be built. It's not totally unexpected. It's what happens in a lot of these custom builds.
When we return, the craftsmen at Two Rivers Boatworks lay paint on the 34-foot venture project. This segment brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here.
An entirely new species of extreme predator is moving offshore. The Yamaha 5.6-liter V8 XTO offshore outboard. Extreme big block thrust and power in the industry's first direct injection 4-stroke. Quiet, efficient, powerful, and proven Yamaha reliability. More than an outboard, it's a fully integrated power system. The all-new Yamaha V8 XTO offshore.
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as the professionals at Two Rivers Boatworks give the 34-foot venture project a very custom paint job.
So yeah, at Two Rivers Boatworks, we got a 34 venture in belonging to Bob Schmollinger. We're getting ready to get the boat painted. The guys have done a great job prepping it, and now it's up to my paint crew to wave their magic wand and make the boat look fantastic.
I'm Nate, I'm working on the 34 Venture. So now that the boat's been prepped, it's ready to go, I'm gonna mix a 545. It's a 2-part epoxy primer. It's got really good adhesion to most surfaces. It's a 1-to-1, 1-part base, 1-part converter, and then we reduce it 25% with the T6. So we'll do 3 coats of the primer. We'll do 1 light coat and we'll let that flash off. Then we'll come back in with 2 heavier coats to give it nice coverage. After that, we'll usually give it about 24 hours to cure, and we'll come back in, sand it down. After we sand it back down, then it's finally ready for top coat. Yeah, so the color that Bob chose is a speed blue. So we're gonna spray the Allcraft SE, that's their metallic line. We're gonna mix it up. It's a 2-to-1 to 15% ratio, so I'll use 2 parts of the base, 1 part of the T3 reducer, and 15% of Allcat 2 to catalyze it. It's a pretty difficult color to apply. It's a metallic. When applying metallics, you've got to be very consistent with your hand. Every time that you go from one side of the boat, you've got to go the other side of the boat. It's got to be the same distance, same pressure, or otherwise you're going to get two different colors out of the gun. We apply 2 coats, 1 light coat, and we come back with a 2nd coat to wet it out completely. They recommend that you spray the clear on that immediately after the paint. You can't come back to the SE and clear it after it's been dried. You'll have too much texture underneath it. You can feel the metallic flake in there. So after the base and the clear coat went down, we had to go back and add a boot stripe to the boat.
Bob insisted on having the boot stripe put on the boat, but we sort of added a little 2 Rivers twist to it, and we sprayed it out in a pearl base and then a silver base, and then we shot it with clear over the base.
So in the clear coat that we used, it was one of Dale's proprietary blends. He adds some crystal to it, and that just adds another layer of depth to the metallic base coat.
So when you actually look at it, you're not sure whether it's the metallic that's sparkling like that or the clear that's sparkling. The paint job looks this thick because of all those little bits of crystal that are reflecting light as you look at it.
The engine cowlings didn't need much fairing. They just needed a good scratch on them for a mechanical bond. So we spray the quick build. That way we don't have to sand it because it didn't need any fairing. They were, pretty much perfect at that point. They could go right with paint right over top. So the colors we used on that was the pearl white that we used on the boot stripe as the main color for the engine cowlings. Painted them, cleared over it. After the clear dried, then we could come back in, put our taping on, and we did all the details and the accents with the speed blue.
When Bob first approached us about painting the boat, we were just going to paint the hull sides, and I met with him and we had a conversation about custom cowlings and so on. So that's when I brought in those blue bands going down the back of the motor, and I really feel that it's kind of unique. I haven't seen it. You see a lot of guys painting that cap on top of the motor color, but they don't actually carry that color down the back of the motor. I just think it was a little bit more modern, a little cleaner than how it came from the factory.
I love it. I think the boat came out great, beautiful boat. Bob should be proud to drive that around town.
Once I put a light on it, and it just had this good depth, and there was this almost change in blues happening as you move the light around. Thank you to my guys for creating that spectacular finish on Bob's boat. They did a great job.
Next week on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat, Wildfire Marine takes on bringing a classic 25-foot Mako back to life. Two Rivers Boatworks puts the finishing touches on the 34-foot Venture project, and George LaBonte meets with Bob Martinez for a day aboard his fully restored 23-foot Hood.